This video is going to require a little bit of participation for you. So what you're going to do is you're going to listen to a story and tell me what crimes you think were committed during the course of this story, okay? So there's a ruler of a Middle Eastern country. This is like a documented thing that actually happened, just to be clear. So it's pretty customary for the leader to be like off in battle while those things are happening, and he had been in the past, but like there was a war going on now and he just like didn't want to do it, so he was at home. And so he tries to Skype one of his army buddies to see how things are going. But his army buddy's wife is the one with the laptop, and she's watching Netflix while taking a bath and accidentally answers. So now the leader of the country is like stalking the webcam of this woman while bathing, but he's not really sure who she is, so he like Facebook stalks his army buddies like, oh, that's my buddy's wife, and I like know his dad because we did this thing. Okay, I know who this is. And so the next day, she's in the bath, watching Netflix, he does the same thing. Hacks into her webcam, watches her bathe. He's like, all right, well, I really find this woman attractive, and also, like, I'm the ruler of this country, so he sent her a message like, hey, you should come to my place. And she can't say no because in this culture, if you denied a message from the ruler of the country, you were put to death. So she goes. She comes to the ruler's house, he sleeps with her. What were you expecting? And she goes back home. So she sends him a message like, hey, I'm pregnant now. And he goes like, oh shoot, this is a problem, I could get in trouble for this. So he invites her husband, his army buddy, like back. Friend will come back, they'll sleep together, then she'll have a baby and everyone will be like, yeah, they had a baby. But here's the thing, his buddy is so dedicated to like the other dudes in the army that he's like, I cannot like go home and sleep with my wife and like enjoy time at home while my friends are fighting for their lives, so he doesn't. So what the ruler does is he like sends out a command to place his buddy on the front lines so he's killed. Then he's like, oh, well, my friend is dead, so I guess his wife can join my harem now. So having heard this story, I want you to think like, what things did this ruler do that just like were bad? And then what things did this ruler do that like were in today's age criminal? And I want you to think about that. Pause the video. If you haven't guessed from like previous knowledge or context clues, this is an actual story from the Bible. King David was just like out in his palace and he was like watching Bathsheba trying to like clean herself on her roof. And I think with our current like cultural conversations around these subjects, we have a general consensus that what he did was rape. She didn't have the option to say no, he was in a position of power, she would have like no ability to get out of that situation. And she clearly did not want to be there as she like went straight back to her home and from all the information we know was like continuing to be dedicated to her actual husband. If you're not sure that what happened was actually rape, I would definitely encourage you to like look up the definition of consent and see that like what the definition of power rape is and like look at it from the understanding of like statutory rape, which we pretty like universally consider to be like a not okay thing. Like adult is the one with the power, like having sex with a child who does not have the full ability to say like yes or no. We would also think from our current understanding that David had this man killed, even though it wasn't like by his hand, he is still basically like a murderer. A lot of times David gets listed as like an adulterer and a murderer, not a rapist and a murderer. Which you may think the point is moot. We recognize he did some bad things, but there are some genuine problems with this. The church historically has done a very poor job of like which sexual ethics it chooses to enforce and why. And so it tends to focus on like certain sets of things as like the bad things and certain sets of things as like, well, they're only really as bad insofar as they relate to these other things. And rape is definitely in the category, especially when it's outside of the like was jumped in an alleyway kind of rape, is something that we think of as just like kind of secondary to all the like really bad ones. For example, we say that the people of Sodom were evil because they were like banging this man's door down, commanding him to like let out all of the men that were coming to visit him so that they could have sex. And a lot of people in the church have looked at this story and just been like, the gays are bad, which is a different thing to unpack on a different day. But what I'm trying to get out of this is that there tends to be like a certain focus on a lot of things and a certain like detraction of like real rape that really occurred. So this is just a call for those within the church and to an extent those outside of it, that when you are talking about things that are rape, call them what they are. Especially if you have the responsibility to teach people, because you are giving them like their worldview and their morality, and if part of their morality includes like the definition of rape and when that needs to be applied, that is super essential. They need to know that just as much as they need to know that like stealing is wrong. For those of you saying like that's not really like a topic that you should talk about like super openly, it's kind of intense, like there is a lot of R-rated stuff in the Bible that is very openly discussed in church settings. Because there is a real woman who really lived, who was assaulted, and her husband was murdered because of it. And I do not think we should ever discount the fact that that happened or that woman's story by turning her into a piece of rubber. Ugh. So maybe if you're discussing this with children and you're not sure how to explain like sex to them, just be like, he kissed her a lot and she like didn't want him to, but then he got mad. You can make that about something that gives your children an understanding of what this woman was put through, what was wrong about what this man did, just a better understanding of the situation without like fully going into everything that's happening there. There's definitely a tendency, particularly within the church, to protect children from like the evils of the world, which is definitely a good thing in a lot of ways. You need to be aware that if your children aren't hearing about these things from you, they will hear about them from someone else eventually. And for the sake of you and your family and the future generations, you need to have a conversation saying like, listen, this is like what was actually going on, and not just like hope that eventually what they see on TV will tell them the right thing to do. And outside of kids, this needs to be a conversation that's happening within congregations, that focuses especially not just on the redemption of the men who have done the wrong. We do a pretty good job of the whole forgiveness spiel, except for some major blind spots, which is another day of topics. We don't talk about trauma and we don't talk about healing in ways that like culturally are happening around us, and the world is doing a better job than the church, and it's embarrassing, and it's not representing God well, and it's just a case of the church being given a job to do and everyone else doing a better job than they are. And that needs to stop. Okay, there are gonna be no bloopers in this video because it was very intense, but I would encourage you to read various resources that I have put in the description on this specific story that I started with in the first place, but also on like church and sexual ethics stuff for your just like further consideration and thinking. Please be respectful and kind if you're going to comment. If you're not sure about something I said, please say that you're not sure about it and say why. Statistically, there will be at least one person who watches this video who was a victim of sexual assault. I'm not going to like encourage this. I'm going to kind of ask this pretty explicitly. If you're going to have a discussion based on this video, listen to the people who are talking about it, and you listen for the sake of listening and not for the sake of proving your own point. And don't just try to get the last word in. I know there are things that you're passionate about in this world. There are things that I am passionate about. You have seen me. Try to listen. And that extends to me. If you have heard what I said and thought, there's something really off about that, tell me, please. I have a very tiny platform, but I would like it to be, I would like to be called out. I would like that. Okay. Thanks for making it all the way through this thing. I know it can't have been fun. Goodbye.